Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's been an interesting run for the Twin Peaks show, and I'm gonna do two episode reviews. I mean, instead of just combining 17 and 18 since they were broadcast the same day, I'll just break them down. And kind of want to do it this way because the obviously the episode 18 finale and everything is kind of a is not easily digestible and easily understood even for myself. I'm sure it's going to spawn a bazillion more theories of what does and what does not exist in the canon and the logic that or lack thereof that it dictates the goings on of the world in which Twin Peaks is inhabited, or one of many worlds, as we may end up assuming or coming to the conclusion that that's the case. But yeah, I'll just stick with 17 right now, and then 18 I'll talk a little bit more about the finale. I may just skip a long description of the finale and maybe just make the ending of it its own separate video, since it is kind of a bizarre, not confusing in the fact that it doesn't make sense, but I would say it left a few things clarified or unsettled that didn't need to be left unsettled, and that would have still given it that kind of Lynchian, ambiguous, open-ended ending, if you will. But anyway, let's focus on season 3, episode 17. All right, so we get some interesting back history on the Judy phenomenon, or Zhao Day. It's kind of silly. I don't know what that means in Chinese, but I'm sure it has some significance, or maybe it's just a made-up thing. I haven't looked it up. I'm just going by because it doesn't give any real background information on the relevance of why it's called that. So Judy essentially is this entity, I guess, a very potent, powerful, and evil entity. So it sounds like something that's right up the alley of the Black Lodge. And he said that before Major Briggs disappeared, he shared this information with Cooper and Gordon. But remember that Cooper was probably already the good Cooper was probably already in the lodge at that point. So basically, I would assume that Gordon and evil Cooper were given the information by Major Briggs, perhaps when Major Briggs wasn't aware that it was the doppelganger. And perhaps Judy, or Zhao Day, or whatever, is what is symbolized by that playing card image, that kind of circular black thing with the little owl wings, or whatever kind of look like things coming off of the side. Like the cave painting or whatever. Or that also shows up on that map. So perhaps that was what the coordinates were supposed to lead to, was this entity, and perhaps that was maybe that's the source of the lodge's evil power or something like that. Because remember, the whole thing with Wyndham Earle was that he thought that the power within the Black Lodge could be wielded to basically take power over the fate of the Earth and the fate of the people within it, and to basically shape the Earth into whatever perverse Garden of Earthly Delights, if you want to look at Hieronymus Bosch's painting, kind of nightmarish realm for the pleasure of the evil mind and the inhabitants that feed off of the pleasures and the fears of the world. So that's just an assumption, but yeah, so basically we get this little bit of information dropped by Gordon that lets Albert know he's been holding that back for a while. Yeah, so it's a little interesting that Judy is not an actual person, or a human person that Jeffries was in contact with, or perhaps this entity had manifested itself as a person, like kind of like the doppelgangers do, or Bob or whatever. Like I said, it's another mysterious entity that's we don't really know all that much about, other than this little snippet. So just don't have much to go on. All right, so then Gordon also mentioned something, that Cooper basically said if he disappeared like Jeffries or Chet Desmond or some of the other agents involved in the Blue Rose cases that are ultimately, I guess, leading to the pursuit of finding this entity, that, to find him immediately, because he said he was trying to kill two birds with one stone. So I won't spoiler the alert, or not the alert, the spoiler, the ending or what happens at the end of this episode just yet. But let's just say that there's two things out there, there's two events or two entities that exist that we're more familiar with, that their fates, you could say, could be what he's talking about, as we see at the end of the this episode. But we'll get there in chronological order. All right, so just on cue, Gordon gets a call and finds out that Dougie Cooper is in fact Dale Cooper. And yeah, so conveniently find that out that, he's on his way to Twin Peaks Sheriff's Department, as Gordon assumes. Let's see. So Ben gets a call and find out that Jerry was actually in Wyoming. I guess that those coordinates were in Wyoming when Richard went up in smoke from electricity. And of course, Jerry thought his binoculars killed somebody. So that at least gives us some location of where that took place. And Jerry must have been on a heck of a trek if he ended up that far away from home base. So yeah, we've got coordinates that basically were the same coordinates that Bobby was given, or Major Briggs gave his son, and Sheriff Truman and Hawk from Mrs. Briggs, that led to Jackrabbit's Palace, which I'm assuming is the White Lodge's portal, the one where Andy was taken. We see Major Briggs's kind of disembodied head floating in space. We see Cooper, it's important because the doppelganger Cooper, because he's got like prison bars, almost looks like around him, or cage around him, so he's trapped in a way. So his I don't know, either we see then the house that the front of the house of Laura Palmer's grew up in. And then the fireman, or I just like calling him as the giant. The fireman's kind of silly, but does something to move the image aside on the screen. So perhaps that maybe Sarah Palmer is now, because maybe that was the destination, was that he was going to go to Laura Palmer's house initially. And perhaps Judy is Sarah Palmer has this Judy entity inside her. Perhaps that's the case. That instead of that, maybe that was initially what Dale was intending to use this place to go there and perhaps, for whatever reason, to meet up with Sarah Palmer, who had this entity inside her. They decide to send him to Twin Peaks Sheriff Department instead. Because, when Cooper shows up, or Evil Cooper shows up, he's not pleased. He doesn't know exactly what this is. He almost seems like it's a trap. So it's like that would be my assumption, was that he initially wanted to go to the Palmer's house, where Sarah Palmer is. But didn't work out that way. He shows up, and Andy and everybody greets him as if they wouldn't freak out that he's got these black contact lenses covering his eyes, and he looks like some transient prisoner escapee or something, or some scumbag. But anyway, we Andy finally remembers, what a little bit snippet of what happened, and apparently, assuming that when he was moving Lucy around through the hall, I think it was setting her up in position to fire at Cooper or Evildale, which we see shortly. So we get Deputy Douchebag breaks out, but One Punch Man takes care of him by knocking open the cells, and Good Cooper's on the phone, and Evil Cooper finds out, pretty much through Sheriff Truman's body language, that something's up. He pulls a quick draw, but Lucy shoots him in the back. So, and then makes a remark about how she understands cellular phones, which is pretty funny. And then, so then the gang that's down in the prison lockup is all brought upstairs by Andy, including the guy that with the rubber glove there, and the weird dimensional area that we'll find out soon whose identities her mask is hiding, or we assume is the mask that is this bizarre face with bizarre face with cut open eyelid or slits for eyes, or removed or whatever. And we get a similar situation with the Black Lodge denizens, kind of the spirits of the lodge, coming back down to try and resuscitate Evildale. But instead, maybe perhaps he's can't be revived so easily, or the fact that, like last time, we saw the sphere that contained Bob kind of floating out of Evildale, but not completely leaving the body. But this time, I think he sees Good Cooper, and remembers that he foiled him last time and that he's still in pursuit of him. So this being one of the two birds that want to kill, with the one stone, of being brought back from the lodge, so that can kind of fulfill Cooper's mission. So now we have this floating kind of rock entity with Bob's face in it, representing kind of this ultimate evil presence, and loose within the room. And instead of an owl, I guess this time he's embodied in that sphere that we saw in episode 8. And our friend here is with the garden glove, is finally going to seek out and fulfill his destiny. In kind of it's a bizarre, funny manner, but the scene is pretty crazy given the choice of the camera shots and the blurred imagery in the the soundtrack and the sound production that Lynch has been amazing at this series. So it's a pretty cool scene all around, with the combating between this entity Bob and this almost superhero-ish type character. So yeah, Freddy has an epic showdown with Bob. Smashes him through the ground, almost like the fire coming up. It's almost like he sent him to hell or something. But the sphere emerges again, and with one more punch with his superpowered glove, he shatters this sphere, or this thing that encases Bob and destroys it, assumingly. Shatters it, and it vanishes or absorbs up into the ceiling or whatever. So we assume that Bob has been defeated. Then, of course, Cooper fulfills the destiny of putting the ring back on, or the owl ring back on the finger of his doppelganger, thus sending him back to the Black Lodge. So apparently this means that Good Cooper is able to come out now, because that was kind of what he's foretold, that one has to come back before one can leave. So that part of it gives us the assumption that Cooper is now finally free from that trap within the lodge. All right, and like I said previously, after, once this is all said and done, that Cooper's room at the Great Northern, or the key that unlocks the door, would have a great significance, and we eventually see that it does. Basically, Gordon and company show up. Cooper looks at this woman that he obviously must recognize from that other dimensional space. And then we see something very peculiar, which is very telling of, and which will create some theories of its own. We see Cooper's kind of face almost looking in awe, or kind of not maybe awe, disbelief, or just kind of confusion, all mixed together, kind of faded in the back a little bit, but superimposed over all that's going on. And interpretation, I think that a lot of people have had, is that basically he is realizing that, or he's like almost like waking up, under the realization this all of this that is taking place is actually a dream, or it's like he's almost out of not out of body, but he's almost like pulled back and watching these scenes unfold as if this is the final act of a play or something like that he's the character in, because we do get the curtain call comment later on. So that's what kind of my interpretation is. It's like something triggered his consciousness to kind of pull back and observe these scenes as they unfold, because I would consider this episode, at least up to a point, the point where we, where things go wrong, I guess you'd say, is that kind of the idealized ending of Twin Peaks. If you said, if things ended as we were assumed they ended, and they didn't have an episode 18, this would kind of be the fan, more of the happy ending, the consumer preferred ending, or the viewer preferred ending for those that wanted it kind of everything nice and resolved in a nice, neat little package. But it's almost like we're coming to the realization through this little foreshadowing that this may not be the case. That this may be, in fact, the dream that Cooper is existing within, or in this one particular reality. But like I said, it gets really confusing in the next episode, and doesn't really, the clarity doesn't improve. But what we do find out is that Cooper basically explains, that this is all kind of unfolded because of his Bobby's father, as Bobby comes in, and Major Briggs is all kind of his whole plan, 25-year plan that's come to fruition. But in that case, it seems like, as I said, that perfectly planned thing out where everything kind of fits in nice and neat and resolves itself is not what Lynch is all about in his storytelling. So I think that's almost like Cooper has become like one of the, maybe perhaps the fourth wall breaking, and becoming, someone watching, like us watching this unfold as if it's, a non-reality, or just a dream, or a, something that appears on, our viewing screen or whatever, but is not actually real. So you can interpret it many different ways. And Cooper says something very, very important that I'm sure most would pick up on, is the past dictates the future. And we'll see that this is precisely what Cooper has in mind for what he's planning on doing. And we will see this is kind of why season 18 happened the way it did. And like I said, we'll get to that. But the past dictates the future is, important in these cycles of events that are taking place. It's got a time travel kind of paradox to it, basically. So the kind of weird woman from the other dimension comes up, and eventually we find her facade or mask of flesh or whatever kind of rips apart, opens up, and eventually revealed that, lo and behold, it is Diane. So I'm assuming this is the Cooper, evil Cooper had something to do with putting her in that state and perhaps banishing her to that place. But yeah, this is we assume is the actual Diane. But yeah. So they apparently had a love interest thing going on, even though I thought it would make more sense that Annie Blackburn would, still be the the focus of that, which I was kind of disappointed that she didn't end up showing up. But as you can see, all this kind of playing out, even this, thing with Diane, saving Diane, almost like saving the damsel in distress, and their reunion together and having a tender moment, and it's very melodramatic, very soap opera-ish too. So, like I said, all these events that are playing out while Dale watches all of this unfold is like almost like a contradiction to what Lynch typically tries to do, even though Twin Peaks does have a lot of melodramatic moments in it, but it's done on purpose. I mean, given the gravity and the seriousness of this scene, it almost kind of contradicts that, because it's not used as a kind of a comedic effect or kind of a oddball effect. Because like I said, this is the resolution of the entire story, at least what we assume is the resolution of the entire story. And then we get one more very important line from Cooper, at least the Cooper that's face is superimposed on the screen. We live inside a dream. It's almost like he's come to this realization, or that he's telling us all this chain of events was, was a dream, or was a dream within him, and he is the dreamer of his own dreams and lives within them. Like we had the Monica Bellucci, Gordon Cole conversation. So this is Cooper's. It's kind of a half-ass way of explaining it. As far as the show explaining it, that this is all kind of a dream or whatever. But it does make sense, because that's like dreams are a huge part of the whole thing. The the consciousness, the perception of reality, and all these things like that, which fits into the surrealistic styling of Lynch, which is why, even though some of his stuff doesn't make 100% sense, the experience itself almost overcomes that and makes the need for absolute certainty and absolute, clarity and storyline explained kind of become, far less important than being immersed in the show or the movie. And then Cooper basically says, I hope I see all of you again, when we basically have got everyone kind of, relevant to this storyline all assembled there that he's, interacted with, other than, Janie E. and Sonny Jim. And almost, he's like, I hope I see all you again, and maybe in another dream or another reality. So he's starting to come to the point that, he's realizing that these people, you may not ever, come back to this reality or to the this dream or whatever and see these people again. So it's almost like a farewell. So yeah, we have a final moment there where he's observing, everyone and looking at everybody, and then all of a sudden something happens and he yells out for Gordon, which, in a similar fashion, the one he was at the Philadelphia office and called out for Gordon when Philip Jeffries finally showed up. So in a kind of, we go down to basically, I think was almost similar to place to where James was after Freddie gave him the backstory of how he has the glove. Seemed like that was the place that he ventured to, and with all the electrical current going, almost like a boiler room, and that seems to be where they end up, in the key to the door to his room, which I assume they must have, I don't know what they did to that part of it. Must have remodeled it and changed something or other or whatnot, because it seems like that's supposed to be the the key that unlocked his hotel room, and that was the source of where all the noise was coming from that Ben Horn and his secretary or whatever were hearing. And when after Dale tells them, he'll see them or see basically Diane at the curtain call. We know there's curtains inside the lodges, so should be enough of a foreshadowing of what that all is about. But he enters the room and we see Mike there. I notice that Mike does not talk in the odd speech of the Black Lodge. He talks in his normal voice as he did when he appeared in Cooper's dream in the first season. So, like I said, more hints that Cooper is, still, existing within this dream state. Given we have some parallels as to what happens with Mike giving the "Fire Walk with Me" mantra, which leads to the I'm assuming the convenience store location, or where Evil Dale and others were brought in. We see that same staircase, and essentially leads up to another portal, because their electricity creates that kind of portal transaction or transmission or whatever, which is basically the door from Cooper's old room led to this place, and then they led to that same kind of hotel room or whatever that Philip Jeffries, who now exists as as kind of a non-entity, kind of I don't know exactly what he's supposed to represent. He's just got this almost like a teapot with steam coming out of the end of it. It's kind of funny. So Cooper gives a date to Philip Jeffries of February 23rd, 1989, which I'm assuming, given the upcoming situation, is a very important event that took place in Twin Peaks that caused all of this to happen, as far as Cooper going to Twin Peaks. So you can pretty much guess what that is. And he's apparently, Jeffries is, I don't know, looking up coordinates or looking up some kind of, a type of means by which to get to the location Cooper wants. We see the owl motif. We see it switch into the other petroglyph. Then we see it switch into an 8, which actually, if you flip that on its side, I'm just making a connection with the symbol that I recognize. If you flip that on its side, it looks like an eternity symbol, like the symbol for an infinite. And we see it, and then it actually appears, and then it rotates to its opposite side, and then we see this little ball of some sort kind of moving along the bottom of it. So it's interesting imagery, but that's what it reminded me of. It almost reminded me of this perpetual loop type of thing, which does play out very symbolic when it comes to the next episode. And also notice that little ball moving around the 8 is also moving in a counterclockwise direction. So it could be a coincidence. It might not be. Then we see once Mike mentions electricity, which is a means by which travel by supernatural travel takes place. Cooper closes his eyes, and to me it almost looks like he's either it's like falling asleep, or not necessarily falling asleep, but it's like he's almost closing his eyes and focusing, almost like he's conjuring up an image in his head of the events. Because we see that ceiling fan again, our friend the ceiling fan, and we see a black and white, somewhat changed version of the events that happened when Laura Palmer was near her end in the prequel. So if you never watched Fire Walk with Me, the prequel movie, these events are going to be very strange to you. So just to let you know, obviously by the age of the actors, James and Laura, they aren't the same age they are now, but we have Cooper in there. Cooper basically observing these events. Laura actually looks over and sees Cooper and screams, which seemed kind of weird to me that was what would have caused her to freak out. But then again, she's in such a state of shock and panic and kind of feared by all of the events that have unfolded that, seeing somebody out of the blue like that would definitely cause her to, to freak. So we've got the Leo and Jacques and Ronette waiting with the Corvette, waiting to go up to the Jacques' cabin to party. But in this timeline or scenario or whatever version, Laura is making her way through the woods, and before she can reach them, lo and behold, Agent Dale Cooper shows up. And remember, Dale Cooper did show up to her in a dream when he told her not to take the ring. So she's seen him in visions and dreams already, and so I don't know if she may recognize him. That's why she trusts her, but not immediately recognize who he is, and the significance of his presence there. And yeah, she mentions that she has seen him in a dream, of course, as I said, which, again, in a dream, did all this what is the dream and what is reality with all of this? Because obviously, I mean, if he's time traveled back to this place, and a lot of the rules of reality have been shattered when you, or as far as our perception of reality and what is dream and what isn't, because they met in dreams, they've but they've coexisted in the same places in in waking life, one after following the other, like I said, in that cycle of trying to find them or find a means by which to avenge them. That Cooper is basically been his mission. So yeah, it's definitely throws more kind of weirdness into the situation. Makes it even a little more confusing. All right, so Cooper takes her hand, and we notice that the events of the past start to unfold in a different way. Her body's no longer on the beach and so on, and that we also know that the screen changes from the black and white, which also is an indicative of the screen in the White Lodge, or the other space on the movie screen, where all those events played out in black and white, and everything was in black and white. And now I think the significance of this change to color is that the event is solidified itself in reality. That the past through that action has been changed and has become permanent, so to speak, in the chain of events, which leads to Sarah Palmer basically taking a picture of her daughter. This is the Sarah Palmer in the future, where Laura is actually killed. And and Leland is dead, and then basically, psychotically stabbing the face of Laura in the picture. And if we assume that this Judy individual is in this this particular future has inhabited Sarah, then perhaps this entity has come to the realization that the past has been altered, and that Laura, this being that was we saw come down in that golden sphere, in opposition to the sphere that Bob was created from, this monstrosity, which that monstrosity could be Judy, the so-called experiment. So it's like when we see in this particular reality that not only is Bob destroyed, but Laura is saved. So perhaps Sarah Palmer, with this entity inside her, is realizing that her plan was, her plan was thwarted or something like that. That's just a possible idea. It's like I said, it's kind of not determined by a whole lot of facts, but that's just what my initial impression was. And then we see essentially the idealized ending, where Cooper is taking Laura home to, wherever, to safety, to the White Lodge. Because remember, he's trying to protect her, but we see, no longer holding on to their hand, which is where the whole this is. I think, to be honest, I think they could have ended it with this episode, and not, had the next episode. But the next episode does give a pretty good kind of discussion of what what happened, and to, as far as Cooper and his journey in his living inside this kind of bizarre dream reality works. But essentially, Laura is within, he's got to get her to a certain place or whatever, and then all of a sudden he's no longer holding on to her hand. And we hear the scream of her being pulled away again. We see the forest, the forest representing the evil in the woods, and the mystery in the woods, the spiritual kind of esoteric, weirdness and primordial nature of the woods, in the fact that the lodge exists within the woods. So, like, perhaps he went into the woods to try to save her, and then something else had a different plan in mind, and so we're led to believe with that everything happened happily ever after is all of a sudden shattered. We get the red curtains, and we get a very familiar song by the very talented Julie Cruz, I believe her name is, singing her song that we all remember from the original run of the series, where actually I think she sings it a couple different times, but When the World Spins is what it's called. But so this is when Madeline Ferguson is killed in the kind of the repeat event. So, like I said, and then in the repeat event, the giant says, "It is happening again. It is happening again." So, that they may not have been an intentional connection there, but remember those lines. The giant's looking at him said, "This event is happening again. It's happening again." I think that is and particularly relevant to what comes up in the next episode. So yeah, that's episode 17 in a nutshell. It's almost creeping up as long as the episode itself, but these kind of shows need explanation. So hopefully that clears a little bit up of what's going on, and maybe I'm completely off base, or maybe I'm onto something. But I'll be back with episode 18 and wrap it all up. So we'll see you then, folks. Take it easy.